My name is Caleb Ramey, and this is for PRS 611, Globalization and Society. My topic is Virtual Desktop Infrastructure in Higher Education. It's an analysis of the pros and cons of VDI in higher ed. Let's get into it. So, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure is essentially your computer as you know it in the cloud or on the internet. It is a way of computing that does not require much additional hardware and is typically a way to do that more inexpensively than it would be to go out and buy a computer outright. So it's something, there's a lot of important things to consider when looking at VDI and adoption in higher ed. It could cost less, possibly, or there's a lot of maintenance having to do on the higher end. We're going to take a look at some of those today. So we're going to look at the pros and we're going to look at the cons, and then we're going to look at some considerations that you may have before implementing VDI in higher ed. So the pros of implementing VDI in higher education are enhanced accessibility and flexibility, a centralized management and maintenance, and improved collaboration and resource sharing, and potential cost savings. Let's take a look at each one of those. So enhanced accessibility and flexibility. That allows for students and faculty to access resources from any device, anytime, anywhere. Typically, we have had to be in an office or in a computer lab to be able to access certain resources. Well, with VDI, that's just not the case. You can access your computer from anywhere, from your phone, from a tablet, from another computer, just through a browser. There's multiple levels of access when it comes to VDI. It also facilitates remote and hybrid learning environments, supporting flexibility in teaching and in learning. So not only for the instructor to be able to access their resources from anywhere, but also the student. If the student is not able to get back to a certain lab because they are not on campus or sick or something, then they can access those resources from a browser from their own device. A centralized management and maintenance plan. So with VDI, it simplifies IT management by centralizing the desktop and application deployment and the updates. In IT, it is possible to have a team of people that are required to go out and do certain things, to manage desktops, to manage applications. With VDI, you simply don't have that overhead. The image management and application management can be done by just a couple of people, or really just one person if it comes down to it. It also reduces the administrative overhead and improves efficiency by streamlining that process and having one person or a small team of people manage that, as opposed to an army of technicians that would have to go out and manage endpoints. Improved collaboration and resource sharing. This facilitates collaboration among students and faculty through shared virtual desktops and applications. So if there is an application that needs to be shared out to students, an instructor can make that available to them for access through VDI and make that easily available to the students to where they would not have it otherwise or have to come to a lab. This kind of enables that mobility that students might see. It enhances access to educational resources and promotes knowledge sharing. So it's something that it enhances what we've already seen. So 2020 was a weird year. A lot of things happened. Zoom and kind of that mobile learning started to become prevalent. You see VDI kind of taking that to the next level, where not only are you just kind of meeting through a video conferencing scenario, but you're actually sharing resources virtually, as opposed to not being able to do that. And potential cost savings. So this is kind of VDI's biggest benefit that a lot of people see. It offers potential for cost savings through reduced hardware requirements and centralized management. And it can lower the total cost of ownership over time, particularly for large-scale deployments. So instead of paying hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of dollars for endpoints, endpoint devices, so your Windows computers, instead of paying for that every year, you would have an upfront cost, which we'll talk about in a minute, and you'll have a VDI environment that will take the place of all of those endpoints, kind of reducing that yearly cost that some businesses, some organizations find very, very helpful, while others tend to have a problem with that. So we'll talk about that shortly. The cons of the VDI in higher education. So this is something that a lot of organizations need to consider when looking at VDI. So infrastructure requirements and initial investment, complexity of implementation and maintenance, the user experience and performance issues, and potential security and compliance concerns. So let's look at each one of those individually. So infrastructure and requirements and an initial investment. With initial investment, it is significant for VDI upfront. It requires a significant upfront investment in the infrastructure, including hardware, software, and network resources. So there needs to be a hardware component, so you actually have to purchase the servers and network switching, all of the hardware that has to make that happen. And then there's the software, so there's the actual software that manages the VDI that would be either Azure or Citrix or Amazon or VMware, many different kinds of softwares kind of fill that role, but you have to purchase licensing in order to do that. And your network. So you have to have network resources and a substantial network in order for this VDI infrastructure to take place, or VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, to take place. Because it's really reliant on a network. If you don't have internet, you don't have your computer. That's kind of the base understanding of that. So you need to have those three things: hardware, software, and network, in order to make VDI even viable for your institution. And it may pose some challenges for institutions where budgets are limited or IT infrastructure is outdated. So if you have a limited budget to where you can't do that upfront cost and you have to purchase computers every year, then that VDI may not be viable for you. Also, if your IT infrastructure is outdated and you don't have the network bandwidth and network speed that you need, it would not be possible for your institution. Complexity of implementation and maintenance. So implementation and maintenance of the VDI systems can be complex and time consuming. So while you don't have a team of people that are going out to do things, you do have one or two people that are highly skilled in that area of VDI that require updates and require everything else to make that a viable system for an organization. It requires specialized IT expertise and ongoing support for optimal performance. So it is a very specialized field that people need to know something about. If you have somebody that just kind of rolled off the line and they know about computers, that's not all you need to know about VDI. There is much more, and it's a kind of a steep incline. It's a higher threshold of learning or knowledge base that you have to have in order to make that leap. User performance, or user experience and performance issues. So with user experience may vary depending on network bandwidth, latency, and device capabilities. Like I said earlier, if your network is bad or not up all the time, or there's some issues there, the users will be impacted. So that really needs to kind of be in place in order for the VDI to make sense for an organization. Performance issues such as lag, latency, and can impact productivity and user satisfaction. So if it's something where if there's any kind of bandwidth issues, that may be a possible problem for users. They may report that repeatedly, which then becomes a kind of a greater concern, because then how do you address those problems? Well, a lot of it goes back to your network has to be robust enough to handle VDI, and then your technicians have to be skilled enough to be able to manage all the images and everything with VDI. Potential security and compliance concerns. With VDI, there are a few things that you need to be concerned with there. So it introduces security risks associated with centralized data storage and network connectivity, and raises concerns about data privacy, compliance with regulations, and protection against cyber threats. So if you have a terror attack or a natural disaster and your data center that houses your virtual desktop infrastructure, if that is gone or destroyed, you have a very large problem, because then you need a disaster recovery plan, or in order for a way to get back to the point where you can use your virtual desktop infrastructure. Otherwise, you have no way to carry on business. You have no way to do anything, because everything kind of lives on the servers, in the cloud, things like that. That is a way around that. Is a lot of businesses like Amazon, like Microsoft, like Citrix, are starting to use cloud infrastructure instead of on-prem infrastructure. That is a decision that needs to be made internally. It also, there's concerns about data privacy and things like that. When you have everything kind of living in the cloud, you don't own anything. You essentially have all of your stuff on somebody else's computer. That's essentially what the cloud is. So considerations that need to be made for VDI adoption in higher education. Assessing institutional needs and readiness. That's a pretty big one. Planning and implementation and development. That's an even bigger one. Addressing user and training support. And ensuring security and compliance. So let's look at each one of those. Assessing institutional needs and readiness. Conducting a thorough assessment of institutional requirements and goals and existing IT infrastructure. I talked about this a second ago. And evaluating the potential benefits and challenges of VDI adoption in alignment with institutional priorities. So to address the first point there, if your institution is ready and has all the infrastructure in place with VDI, with everything else, or with your network infrastructure, with the server infrastructure, then they could be ready. If not, there's a pretty steep cost of entry. Secondly, if your institution is not interested in VDI, if they don't either they don't understand it, or they would rather just use computers, which is what everybody's familiar with, it may not be as viable for the institution because there is a not necessarily cost associated with getting into that field, but a cost of understanding that somebody needs to have in order to embrace what VDI is. So there's a couple of different things there. So if your institution is going in that direction, there's a couple of planning things that need to happen. So planning for implementation and deployment. You develop a comprehensive implementation plan, including hardware procurement, software licensing, and network optimization. So those are the three big keys that we talked about. Your hardware procurement, so you can buy the servers and things that you need for the VDI to run on. Your software licensing, so you're paying a company that says, essentially, I license you or enable you to do this. And your network is optimized to allow people to connect to their infrastructure easily and quickly. Those three things are a requirement when it comes to VDI. And you establish clear goals and timelines and performance metrics for evaluating access. So if your institution has benchmarks that you want to set or a timeline that you need to have things done by, those things need to be communicated clearly up front. So you kind of know where you're going. It's kind of a roadmap. If you set out on your VDI exploration journey and don't have a map to get there, it's very hard to do those things. So having clear goals and clear timelines when implementing that the VDI process is a requirement. Addressing user training and support, providing training and support for students, faculty, and staff to ensure the effective use of VDI systems. So that's a must. And establishing help desk support and resources for troubleshooting and addressing user concerns. So having a frontline in the technical world that will help mitigate any issues that would be there are a must. So having a knowledgeable help desk that would address any issues or things like that is a definite must-have. And any training, because people are coming from a world where computers are what they know. That's what they use every day. To a world where VDI is a standard. So using a virtual desktop may not be familiar to some people. And so they need to be trained on what they can do, what they can't do, because there are some limitations there. And lastly, ensuring security and compliance. Implementing a robust security measures to protect against data breaches and unauthorized access, and ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations and industry standards through regular audits and assessments. So there's things called pen tests that can see how vulnerable your system is, that would allow for kind of feedback on the stability and security of a VDI system that has been put into place. There's a lot of network and security and really IT jargon that is kind of tossed around. But there's a lot of security concerns when it comes to that, including backups, immutable backups, and things like that. So there's a lot of other security and compliance concerns that are there with VDI. In conclusion, there are a lot of pros and there are a lot of cons with VDI. But I think that this kind of demonstrates those different aspects that you really need to consider when it comes to implementing VDI. There must be planning. There must be kind of a plan in place, a clearly mapped directive from leadership to be able to do those things. And when in the VDI adoption process, it can be difficult at times because you will encounter hurdles that you need clear direction to overcome. And finally, for institutions that would be interested in implementing VDI, it is a game changer when it comes to accessibility, but also there are some hurdles that each institution needs to address. So I hope this small presentation kind of shows some of the capabilities that are there with VDI. Thank you. Have a nice day.